Hello and welcome to the Rock Your Voice podcast. Vocal coaching tips that will transform your voice, interviews that will inspire, industry guidance, and so much more. Without further ado, let's get on with the show. Today on the Rock Your Voice podcast, I am joined by Justine Giles. She is a fantastic singer and songwriter. She's now calling Calgary her home and has some really cool things coming up. It was amazing to talk with her, and I firstly want to say thank you so much to Justine for being so generous and genuine and open and honest in this conversation, because we do touch on some more challenging topics, shall I say. And I really appreciate her for sharing, because this is it's a great opportunity for people who might be experiencing the same sort of situation to be able to reach out or talk about it a bit more. And I am here for you if any of this conversation rings a bell. We do talk a little bit about domestic abuse and mental abuse, getting out of a kind of a toxic relationship. So if just a heads up if that's going to be a bit of a trigger for you, but also thank you so much, Justine, and please do reach out if you do resonate with this topic or situation, because I would love to help you find some resources if I can. But that is not all that this podcast episode is about. There's obviously lots of industry insight and a lot of fun hearing the story behind Justine's evolution as a musician. So stay tuned and I hope you enjoy. Justine, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast with me today. I'm really excited to chat with you. We've been chatting backwards and forwards quite a bit on Instagram. I've been following your latest release and all the things that you've been doing, but you've got a really cool story, and I love that you've braved, you've made the trek across Canada to make Calgary your home and everything. So let's start from the start. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into music, and we'll head towards how you ended up here in Calgary. But where did music all start for you?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share. Yes. It's always cool to connect with people that I've met through Instagram. It's actually brought me to some really great friendships, so that's really cool.
Awesome.
So yeah, my life started in Northern Ontario. I grew up in a place called Sudbury. It's about 4 or 5 hours north of Toronto.
Okay.
And grew up in a fairly musical family. My dad's a bass player, so he was always in bands and touring and doing festivals. And he's a songwriter as well. He's a good singer, a guitar player. And yeah, I guess I just grew up with that from the time I was born.
Right.
And went to schools that just always had plays, lots of theater productions. Went to an arts high school. And yeah, I mean, I loved it from the time I was a kid. And I also loved writing. So lots of poetry, lots of diaries, the ones with the lock and key.
Yes.
Yeah, that was me, like all the time.
I love it. So, how was it with a musical family? I grew up with a musical family too. And was it just something that, for me, it was kind of like, this is just what a normal family is like. And then you meet other people and it's like, oh, totally. Your dad's an accountant. What?
It was really helpful for me growing up because, I mean, as I matured, like, he was always there and part of the process, which is really special. Like, I've always had that special connection with my dad. And I think it's really cool to do music with someone that you love and have a good bond with. Like, that was a really cool foundation for me. So I probably started songwriting officially when I was in high school.
Okay.
And just took my dad's acoustic guitar, which is literally beside me right now, and I never gave it back. And luckily he's more into playing bass than acoustic, but yeah. I mean, he was just always there, and he played on my first record and basically made my first album possible. So we kind of co-produced that together when I was maybe 19 or 20.
That's very cool.
And played some live shows together. So it's cool. And I think he misses it, and I think I do too sometimes. If I ever go back home, it would be cool to do a one-off show, like when I go back and travel and just kind of visit.
Oh, I love that.
So,
did he kind of critique you, or did he just encourage you all the way, or was there, because I with my dad, it was up until I was like 20. He was like, you are not getting into this business. This business is corrupt and horrible and full of terrible people. And it took a lot of proving to him that, no, this is the way that I'm going. But was your dad always supportive, or was he kind of, was he a harsh critic, or how did he help you?
I think he was always super supportive, but I think he also was cautious because he knows what the industry is all about, and he knows what it's like, not just on the touring side, but the recording side and everything that goes into that. And I mean, back in his day, it was more so like mailing CDs to radio stations, and that's not how it goes anymore. The industry's changed a lot, but yeah, I don't think he ever cautioned me against it, but he's a supportive but cautious person, as anyone would be, and I would be too with anyone entering this business, because it is a tricky one to navigate.
Totally. So you started writing in high school. I love that. That's awesome. And did any of that writing make it to the light of day, or was that just kind of, I'm gonna just pretend I'm a singer and just fantasize about writing music, or did you like literally start writing and then you actually dove into it?
Yeah, I would say more so near the end of high school, or even after college. I did a year program for art and design. So it had graphic design, photography, art history, that kind of stuff. And around that time, I wasn't fully immersed in music. I was trying to just like go to school and have something, to show for it. But by the time I finished that program, it was just on my heart to do music. So I would say it was a little bit after high school that I focused really on a lot of songwriting.
Yeah.
So by the time I was, maybe early 20s.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's crazy though, hey. It's like once you get that bug, that's it. You're stuck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I was excuse me, I was just listening to a podcast that you did recently. I think it's the Calgary sessions, was it? Is that
Yeah.
And you said something on that like that honestly nearly made me cry. It was so beautiful. And you were saying that how music, it never leaves you, and you can also be vulnerable with it. And it's like, so that the relationship with music, I was like, oh, that one hit. But speak a bit about that if you can.
Of course. I think music has been my constant through life, and I've led a fairly lonely, isolated life. I don't know if that's because I'm an old soul and I don't really fit in with people in my age group. Like I had a hard time growing up, and I talked to my teachers on recess breaks and lunch breaks, and I had substantial conversations, and grew up with a brother that has special needs and all these kinds of things. And I think I was just always really responsible and kind of took life seriously. I didn't really have normal relationships, like quote unquote normal. I didn't have a lot of typical childhood situations, or it's almost like I was bypassing a lot of milestones because I just felt like I didn't have to go through certain things.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is weird to say, but I never really had like a partying stage. There's some people that just have these traditional milestones. Like this person parties at this age, and by that age you have your first boyfriend, and by this age you do this. And I never really followed a traditional path like that.
Right.
So music for me was the constant relationship my whole life.
Okay.
Yeah. It was like a safe place for me to express emotion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So when did it turn from, so when did you start doing gigs? When did you start performing and showing people your work?
Yeah, good question. Technically, I got used to being on a stage when I was in school. So from the time I was in public school, all through high school, I got to be on a stage and be in big auditoriums full of, everyone's parents and stuff like that. So I loved it from the time I was young. But official gigs, I'd say sometime in my early 20s, I started doing open mics, and that gave me an opportunity to just showcase my own material for the first time. And I started going regularly and started, building a local community, a local following in my hometown. And after that, people start to get to know you in a small town, right? Like you get to network and find out who the business owners are and who owns the bars and all that kind of stuff. So then people would just get to know me and look me up online and book me for their events. And yeah, I mean, it just kind of happened organically, but I'd say in my early 20s, I started booking gigs and actually getting paid.
Yeah, right. Was it very intimidating for you to step into that role? Were you always kind of confident that you were capable of actually stepping onto a stage where someone would pay you to be able to play your own music, or was there any imposter syndrome or any of that kind of stuff, or was it just the natural next step?
Yeah, I think it's always felt natural for me. I don't know what happens, but and maybe you can relate to this, but it's like you step on a stage and something switches. So like you kind of go into a mode, or at least I do. It's just, it's not that I become someone else. It's, if anything, I become more of myself on a stage, which is really weird, but
yes, I 100% relate to that. It's so true. It's just like, okay, well, it's an all or nothing space to be in, right?
It is.
If you go up there and you're trying to be something else, it's all going to fall apart real quick.
Yeah, and I talk about this a lot lately, but I really enjoy things that bring me back to the present moment. So that could be doing a podcast like this or performing on a stage, because you just have to be there.
Yeah.
You know, you can't really be floating off anywhere else, because if you do, you're not going to give the best performance that you can. So I'm someone that has such an active mind, and I'm always thinking about the next thing and the next project, because things take a long time to plan. Or I'm reflecting on the past and trying to learn and heal and not repeat patterns that are unhealthy, you know. So my brain is always just spinning and spinning. So I think I just get to be and come alive when I get to be in a space of performance. And yeah, I really enjoy it. So I think it's always been a natural thing for me.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people that I work with in the studio who are just very, very talented people who have just been terrified to just take that step of going to an open mic, or, you know, starting to own it, of like, okay, you're not a student anymore. You're, believe it or not, you're a singer. Go do what you've been paying me to tell you to do for the last 5 years or whatever. So yeah, it's really interesting to try and help people build the confidence to take that step. Do you have any words of advice for anyone in that sort of situation?
Well, first of all, I love that you're helping so many people do that, because I think it's really special. And that's something I'm giving a lot of thought to as well. Like, how can I support up and comers? Because it's such a important time of one's artistic journey. And I think you really need to have support. Especially, I mean, it's good to have support throughout your whole career, but it's like an incubation stage. You know? Like, I think it's really important for people to have support. But yeah, I think, I don't know, like, I've always given myself permission to come alive on stage, because it's been a safe space for me. Like I said, I mean, I just feel like it's safe. So I don't know if everyone would feel that way, because I know a lot of people have fear about it. But the only thing I can really say is that if you're true to yourself, people feel that and they pick up on that, and it just bridges so much connection. And you never know who's in that audience that needs to hear your unique story and your unique voice, right?
Totally.
So yeah, I just don't think it really serves anybody to show up and try to be someone you're not, because you're not going to feel good about it. Like, that's going to give you an icky kind of feeling inside. And then no one's going to relate to it, you know?
Totally.
So I just think music is such a powerful tool for connection. I think it's super healing for ourselves, but I think it's also, it's brave, but it's so worth it to show up and just do you, like, do whatever your unique thing is. And I think that's a big thing as well, is, you know, there's so many people doing this. There's so many artists. And so we can get it in our heads sometimes that, well, why am I going to do it? Or why am I different? Because there's so many other artists and so many other people on social media. So why am I any different? But I think it's important that people do know that they're different. Like, everyone has a very unique story, a very unique physical, like, tangible voice too. To use.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love all of that. So after you started doing your open mics and you were getting traction and everything, so what was the next step for you in your music? Did you go to, obviously I'm assuming, recording albums and starting to release your music? What was the next step for you?
Yeah, I stayed fairly independent for most of my career. I did a lot of writing myself, producing myself for quite a long period of time.
Nice.
And traveled and played shows and that whole thing. And eventually I got to a point where I wanted to keep growing. So I left my hometown and did some touring and showcasing and that kind of stuff, which I think was good for me as a young artist, just to get some experience under my belt. But in terms of recording, I just got to a point where I realized that I wanted to have better quality production, and didn't want to do it myself. Like, I love making demos and the creation process, but if you really want to grow your recording career, you need to have quality recording.
Yes.
And yeah, I think it's important to invest in quality production. For me, that was just naturally the next step.
Yeah. How did you find the right people to work with? What was in your checklist of
Well, I mean, as you know already, I didn't really find the right people for quite some time.
I know, I'm kind of tricking you into this.
Oh yeah, can you imagine? But that's the funny thing, and I love that you brought this up, though, because everyone thinks that you're always going to find the right people right away, and it doesn't always happen that way. No. And I want to relate it to just relationships in general. Like, sure, traditionally speaking, people found their husbands and wives in high school and stayed with them forever, and it just worked out. It doesn't always work that way anymore. Totally. You know, relationships these days are a lot more like, I don't know, I don't even know how to phrase it, but things have really changed. Society has been a little bit more open to people breaking up marriages if it's not working. Whereas before, it was just so unacceptable to do that. If you weren't happy, people stayed. Like, a lot of my great-grandparents and even my grandparents' generation stayed together in relationships that were not healthy, just because they were, like, legally bound. And I think that's changed quite a bit. Like, I'm sure there's still situations like that exist, but sometimes you don't meet the love of your life in high school.
Yeah. And I think the education is a lot more available now of what is a healthy relationship. A healthy relationship used to be like a marriage that is still a marriage. That was a healthy relationship.
If you're married for 50 years, that's congratulations.
Very healthy relationship right there. Divorce, bad.
Totally.
But yeah, no, I think the information now is out there as to what is a healthy relationship, whether it be a marriage, whether it be a friendship, whether it be a working relationship. And I think there's a lot more opportunity now for, especially, and I kind of, I hate kind of going down this path, but like, especially for women. I totally agree. Always kind of been easier for men to ditch on something, and kind of that's been the stereotypical thing that you see. Is it's the even if you think back to like the movie Grease or whatever, it's like the dude ditches out and that's okay, and the girl hangs around writing letters on perfume paper. Like, very bizarre. But yeah, so stereotypically the guy sticks, it's okay for the guy to leave. And now I think there's a lot more education of how, what a healthy relationship looks like, and that it's okay for women to be aware of that and say when they're not feeling like they're in a healthy relationship. So we're going to dig more into this, but it's funny because there is always, and I personally, this I don't know what this is going to make me out to sound like, but I couldn't be with someone who wasn't a musician. Like, relationship wise, my track history has always been musicians. And when I see people on stage performing like incredible music and that chemistry, it's like, how are you not together? Or like, how do you just step off the stage and that was it? That was the most beautiful relationship I've ever seen in that capacity, and now you're just buds. Like, I don't like it.
I question that all the time, trust me.
Right? So I totally get where people can be in a musical working relationship and there's just when you have that musical chemistry, it would just naturally progress to the next level. So yeah, if you don't mind, let's look a little bit at your story with when you started working more on the production side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a tricky thing to navigate because you're right. I mean, I think there is a natural chemistry that happens between certain artists, between certain creatives. Not always, right?
Yeah,
there's some situations where you just don't vibe.
Yeah.
I went into a lot of co-writing situations and tried it out and tested the waters with certain people. And if you don't click, there's just nothing there sometimes. And, you know, that shows up in the songs. But there's other times when you meet someone and you just hit it off. Like it could be a friend, or it could be someone in the music industry that you start working with. And sometimes it's a very real thing, or at least it feels like a real thing.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
So it's tricky because whether you're doing business with a friend or a lover or a parent, like sometimes business and personal work really, really well together, and sometimes they don't. And I think there has to be some sort of balance. And the problem is there's a lot of power imbalances, I think, especially between males and females. And that's the other thing too, is like, this is a very male dominated industry. And traditionally men have had a lot of power, as we were just kind of discussing. So it adds a different dynamic to things when they're in a position of power over you, or maybe they're further in their career than you are, that kind of thing. It can just become tricky. So essentially I got to a point where I was ready to work with a producer for the first time, which was a big risk, and saved up my money, right? Because it's fairly expensive. Like, I don't know if people realize that you have to invest like thousands of dollars really to get a quality recording.
Yes.
And it requires a deposit, and then you go and record, and usually you pay the other half when it's done. And so I had researched, and I was young. I don't know how old I was, but probably around 23 or 24. And I found a producer just online. I just started researching like who was in Ontario, like not even just in a specific city, but I was kind of researching producers and listening to music that I loved and trying to figure out connections, because it's a really small music industry. It's a small world. Which was kind of shocking to figure out as well. So I found a producer that had recorded some albums and songs that I really liked from artists that inspired me. So I thought, okay, this makes a lot of sense. And it turned out that they originally were from the same hometown as me.
Oh, crazy.
And we both kind of had some really interesting synchronistic things happening. So it, again, you kind of feel like, oh, this is probably meant to be, or what have you, because it's like, oh, there's all these signs. So I took that risk and went to Toronto and worked on this recording, and we just started with a single, and we were going to see how it went. And it went really well.
Nice. And
I showed up and we recorded a song that I wrote myself. So he didn't really have anything to do with the writing of it. It was just kind of a really quick recording, couple days, and called it a project, basically.
Nice. Okay.
But around that time, he was involved with a music program and had basically invited me to apply, which I did. So this was a fairly big music program in Toronto called Canada's Music Incubator. And there's quite a few artists that take that program. So I got into that, moved to Toronto, took the program, and still kept this relationship with my producer going. And on top of working together, I mean, we started just getting to know each other, and like texting all the time, and we just had a vibe. And I was like, okay, scary. And, you know, my grandfather had died at that same time. So there was like a lot of vulnerability and just a lot of unknowns. And he was quite a bit older than me. And to some people that may be like an immediate red flag. But for someone like me who always connected with people that were older than me, wasn't really.
Right.
a bad sign for me,
Totally.
because literally my whole life, like, I've been hanging out with people twice my age, and it was
Right.
just my norm.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, it felt very natural for me. But looking back, I mean, there's definitely a lot of red flags, because he didn't really want to commit to a relationship, and he was like, well, we can't date, we're working together and we're doing this and we're doing that. And I mean, eventually, I guess we didn't really have a conversation about it, but we just got caught up in this whirlwind of creating, and then a relationship, and everything just kind of happened. Yeah, it turned out to be a really messy situation that dragged on a little bit too long.
Right.
And we recorded a few more things together and released it and stuff, and eventually things just went downhill from there.
Right. So, and that was kind of the turning point for you, where you were like, is that where you decided to reset and come out to Calgary, or did it take you a little while from that to get things figured out? Like, how did things progress from there?
Yeah, it took me a while. I think, I mean, it's hard to describe in a minute or less, but this took so much time and energy, and it took me probably a year or two. I stayed in Toronto and I just worked and tried to survive, and it's a really lonely, expensive city to try to navigate on your own.
Yeah.
So basically this relationship was on and off, and I was kind of contemplating what my next moves were going to be. And it was really devastating to lose a creative partnership, but also like a personal partnership. And it was kind of my whole world. I didn't have much else going on for me in Toronto, aside from trying to build my career and this relationship. So that's problematic when you lose everything. So
I love how you just say that when you lose, it's problematic.
Yeah, I mean, if you think that this is the love of your life and this is it, and I had so much hope because they had, significant connections in the industry and worked with people that I admired, and I thought that was my ticket and everything was going to be great. And none of that happened. Like, a lot of it just blew up in my face, and I was kind of left with nothing. So how do you navigate from there, right?
Little more than problematic, I'd say. I think you can give yourself a bit more than that.
Yeah.
It was a pain for a little bit.
Yeah, it was, honestly, it was really devastating. And I'll paint a little picture of what that looked like. I mean, it looked like me living in a basement apartment with barely any light. I barely saw the light of day. Working a really crappy job. Just trying to live. And I just remember, like, crying every day. Like, I would just sob in the shower, on the floor. And I just had no idea if I could ever get back to songwriting, because my well was just dry. Like, I had no inspiration anymore. And I just became this, like, lifeless thing, just going through the motions every day, and it was brutal. So I had a couple things happen. I mean, my grandmother lived a few hours away from Toronto, and she knew, obviously, I was struggling quite a bit, and I wasn't prepared to just give up for some reason on my career. I mean, I kind of had to take a step back for a few years and figure out what I wanted to do, but I wasn't ready to, like, move back to my hometown and give up on my dreams. Like, it just wasn't.
Good for you.
Yeah. As hard as it was, that was never an option for me. So my grandma was like, why don't you go out to Calgary and revisit, like, some of your artist friends, and think about moving out there and all this kind of stuff. And I've always loved the West Coast. Like, I love the mountains, and I've always kind of felt at home on this side of Canada. So I came out here for a trip and realized that the only thing that I had left, really, that was holding me back was this on again, off again situation. So I thought, well, maybe I need to just try to get myself back and get my creativity back, my music back, and plan to start writing, recording, and let's go. So I basically just moved myself across the country and decided to fully end that relationship, because if I didn't leave and move across the country, it just would have, I honestly don't think it would have ended. It just was so on again, off again, this cycle that was just really negative cycle that kept repeating. So
and thank you for sharing all of that. Like, you and I have talked quite a bit, but outside of this, about kind of those types of relationships and your situation and a situation that I was in the past as well. And I think it's so important to talk about that, because I feel like, very similarly to what we were talking about earlier, is now the conversation about what a healthy relationship looks like is starting to be a normal conversation. And now I feel like it's starting to come out. You hear words like narcissist and mental abuse and all that kind of stuff gets, I don't want to say thrown around, but you hear it an awful lot. And I think we're at a point where people are starting to just learn more about that and understand that that is part of an unhealthy relationship, and that is sometimes a lot more common than we're aware of. And just hearing you say, I had to move across the country for it to end. Like, it sounds extreme, but I had to sell my house and move. Like, it's it's happening to people. So I'm very passionate about being an advocate for women in these situations, and also particularly, of course, because I love musicians. So like music and mental health and all that kind of stuff, like these things that we don't necessarily think of as like a mental health element are like, they're like, oh, well, this is great fuel for the next album. It's like, well, yeah, please, like, stop saying that to me, people. Like,
I know.
It's just, yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think people need to hear that, and maybe it does help you write your next album, whoever you are listening to this. But also, please reach out if you feel like you need to move across the frigging country to get away from someone. And don't, oh gosh, now I'm going off on a lecture. And don't feel bad like that. Something else that I learned from my caseworker was it takes 7 times you go back to someone on average in an abusive situation. So the back and forth, like you said, like I kept going back, all this, the average is 7 times, no matter how bad it is. That's the average.
It takes a long time to even realize sometimes how toxic or abusive your situation is, because when you're in it, your sense of perspective is not accurate. And I think from an outside perspective, people don't always understand that if they haven't been through these types of situations. But it took me moving across the country and probably 5 or 6 months after for me to realize certain things that had happened to me, or certain things that he had said, or certain manipulations that had happened. It took me so long for me to get clear view about what happened. Yeah. And that's how you know that you've been through some sort of, abusive situation, because you obviously just don't see it. Like, it's so easy for someone to say, well, if someone's abusing you, why don't you just leave? But it's not that simple. No. And there's so many layers of why this happens or why you keep going back, and a lot of it's subconscious. Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in your brain, and sometimes it relates back to your childhood and traumatic events that happened to you, and that makes you kind of susceptible to like people that want to take advantage of you and your good nature and the fact that you're a giving person or you're a caretaker or whatever. So it takes a lot of inner work too. Like, as much as it fuels some great music, there's like a lot of things that are happening mentally and emotionally, right? So yeah, totally. And it's, again, thank you so much for talking on this, because I think there is also a perception of who a victim of mental or physical domestic abuse is. And it, again, just going back to the beginning of our conversation of how you were quite a solitary person to begin with. You had relationships with people who were older than you, so that was normal. And the fact that you weren't like, oh my gosh, when I look at that and I listen to that, I'm like, well, perfect.
Like you're not surrounded with 75 friends, 7 days a week of like this, this circle that would need to be chipped away at to get at you in the first place. Like,
right.
You're used to being solitary. So suddenly it wouldn't trigger you and be like, holy shit, where have all my friends gone? Why am I alone? Why am I here? It's like, well, this is just kind of normal.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I have to be really cautious just in relationships in general, because it's so easy to be kind of codependent or to have a relationship that becomes your whole world when you're used to being a person that doesn't have a huge social life. It's like, yeah, I have friends, but not friends I see on the daily, So if I have a relationship and someone I see daily, it's easy for that to become my world. Yeah. So now obviously I'm a lot more conscious of that, but in that situation I wasn't. And I also want to say too, like when that relationship started, I was cautious. Like it's not like I didn't have any concerns or any guards up. I've always been a very guarded person, as much as I'm so vulnerable on like social media or on stage and through music. When it comes to my personal intimate relationships with people, like I've always been super guarded, like a lot of walls up before I really trust someone and let them in. Yeah. So it's interesting to me that I felt safe enough with him to even let him in, because for me that's a big deal. Like I'm not someone that just lets anyone into my heart or into my world. You know?
Yeah. It's funny, because you always have this vision of someone like creeping in with a cloak and like dun dun dun. They even have the background music going. It's like no, they're usually pretty intelligent, good looking, like got their stuff together kind of people. And so no, I'm really, really happy to hear that you made that change and that it's all for the positive, and that I was going to say something about Toronto anyway, but I won't say but I'm glad you're here.
A lot of people I talked to had a bad Toronto experience, so I guess I'm not the only one.
Right. I was so excited my first experience to go to Toronto, and I was like, maybe it's kind of like the in between of like London and bigger than Calgary, not quite London. It's going to be awesome for music and all this kind of stuff. And I just got there and I was like, it was kind of like London without the architecture. It's rainy and grey, and people are just as angry. I was like,
it's a very different way of life. And I think that's something I really appreciate about Western Canada. I just feel that people have a better work-life balance here, and they want to do things outside of work, and you have time to do things outside of work. And Toronto is very hustle and bustle and work and 9 to 5, and then an hour commute here and an hour commute there, and there's only so many hours in a day.
Yes. So when did I don't know if the floodgates reopened, but when did the songwriting door reopen for you? Has it been an easier process, or do you have that voice in the back of your head kind of judging as you're going now, or are you feeling you're free to write again?
It took me a long time. And as someone who identified as a writer for my entire life, it was so hard to not be able to write for a couple of years. And I tried to force it after that relationship, and even when it was on again, off again, but I really just couldn't access anything. Right. And that was devastating for me. And I think that's why I questioned my career moving forward for a while, because I thought, if I can't write, like, how am I going to do this? Yeah. So that was really hard. And I didn't really end up writing again until, I had little inspirations here or there, an idea for a chorus or some lyrics here or there, but I kind of just took it as it came and put it on the shelf for a bit. And my intention was to move out here. And I thought, it would be easy to just come out here and start writing and recording. And it took a long time.
Yeah. And how did you assemble your crew of musicians and your community of musicians? Were there a lot of people that you knew from the CMI thing, or did you have a kind of a network out here already?
Yeah, thank God for that, because I came out here and I met up with a few musician friends that I took CMI with, which is cool because they were from out here, but we all met and did this intense program in Toronto. So it was cool to have a solid base of people when I first got here. The other cool thing is that I realized that, you know, the Calgary scene is fairly tight knit and small. And most musicians here also took CMI another year.
Yeah.
So maybe we didn't take it at the same time, but we all have the same network of people.
Yes.
And they also started running it out here at Studio Bell. So I was like, this is awesome. So even if I didn't take it with someone directly, like every time I would meet new artists, they're like, oh, I took CMI. I'm like, I took CMI.
I'm a CMI graduate too.
So yeah, I mean, it brings people together because there's just that common ground, and it's like we've all experienced something, maybe not together, but kind of in a weird way.
Totally.
And we all know the same industry people, like same producers and managers, and we've probably had the same experience with certain people, and it's become this community where we can kind of lean on each other and collaborate, and also ask each other like, hey, have you worked with this person, and kind of do some investigating, because it's a tricky business to navigate, and I think it's good to get personal recommendations for the most part. I mean, everyone has a different experience with someone, but I mean, if you want to know right off the bat if for sure you should steer clear from a certain person or business, then you want to know, and you want to have friends in the industry that you can talk to. So
totally.
I was really, really lucky to have that base of people as soon as I got here. So yeah, thank God for that.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. So you've been recording, you've been releasing new music. How's it feeling? How's it all going?
Really good. It's been such a long time. And I think when you go through a time where, like I said, you question it and you don't know if you're ever going to do it again. Yeah. To be able to do it again makes me appreciate it that much more, because it's always been a natural thing for me, obviously, but to come back after being away for so long and to come back stronger, and now I'm like learning how to tell my story and use my voice and empower other people, like it feels even greater than it ever was. So yeah, it's a cool feeling.
Okay, I'm not gonna cry. I'm a crier.
I am too.
That's beautiful. I am so happy for you. So is there anything just that's coming up real quick here that, I mean, obviously this podcast is going to be out there forever and ever, but is there anything that we can share about that's coming up real quick that you'd like to mention? Or where's the best places for people to follow you and keep up to date and all of that good stuff?
Yeah, so I'm actually releasing a lyric video for my new single, Save Myself. Yay. Mostly because the lyrics are really important to me. So I figured I would release a lyric video and just kind of extend the cycle of the release and get in touch with press again and give it like a second push before we move on to the next single. So that's cool. That's coming out really soon. Still in the studio working on the next single and thinking about how I want to visually represent it and planning that photo shoot and stuff like that. Very so there's a couple songs coming out this year, which is exciting. Nice. And yeah, I guess the best places you can follow me. I mean, I love Instagram. Obviously, we're both on there and kind of interact on there a lot. So, yes. My website, Justine Giles, pretty much everywhere. I mean, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you can stream.
Awesome. I'll put all the links in the show notes so that anyone who's listening can go follow you and support you. And I'm so excited to come and see you play in person at some point and keep continuing to support you and everything. I hate saying this to be. I'm very proud of you. It sounds very patronizing, and like we've never even met in 3D, but at the same time, like really fucking proud of you for what you've done and that you've stuck to your goal and your dreams, and fucking right on. Like
I so appreciate that, and it's so nice to be able to have these conversations because life is busy and sometimes you forget to give yourself credit for how far you've come, right? So I appreciate that and being able talk about it and reflect. And
yes. Oh, well
we
done.
We all need to give ourselves an extra pat on the back, you know?
Totally. And like, I guess sort of parting words for anyone listening, and if any of this has kind of resonated with you, please feel free to reach out to me, and if you do suspect that you are in an abusive situation, then 99.9% you are. So just be aware of that, and do take care of yourself. But Justine is testament to there is light at the end of the tunnel. You don't have to sacrifice your dreams. You don't have to stop following what you believe in. And yes, love it. So proud of you. You rock. And I can't wait to see what the future holds for you, because it's going to be, if you can get through that and get to this point, then there's going to be big things ahead. So really excited for you.
Yeah, hopefully I can do anything now.
There you go. There you go. And if you doubt yourself, just call me and I'll just tell you all of these things. Awesome. All right, my dear. Well, thank you so much. And it's been great to chat with you.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please feel free to like, share, subscribe, and if you feel inclined to leave a review, I truly appreciate it. You can check out all things voice at rockitvocalstudios.com. That's ROCKIT vocalstudios.com, and follow me on social too at Rocket Vocal Studios. Thanks again for listening, and I'll be back with lots more for you very soon.